In last week's video, we talked about how estate agents valued land, and we've discovered that it was overpriced. There was often a lot of competition when it was on the market, and it really didn't make an awful lot of sense as a developer. So in this week's video, what we're going to be talking about is how a property developer would value that land, and you will see that there is a significant difference in the way that that valuation is put together. There's two factors that essentially affect the price of land: location and the type of house that you put on there, or more specifically the size of house that you put on there. And again, that size will also be influenced by the location. So for instance, if you take a location that has got, let's say, a lot of social housing around it, then typically you're going to be building smaller houses. So they are going to be probably in the sort of like 100 square meter sort of range, 120 square meter type range. If you are building maybe in a gated community, then they are going to be significantly higher square meterage houses, probably in the 200 to 300 square meter type range. So that in itself will have an effect. And in terms of location, what is around the immediate area that you are looking? So you found a piece of land, what's in that immediate area? So you need to look at that, because that will have an influence on the valuation. The second thing is that we just touched on is the actual size of the housing. So if you were, let's say you were building a private estate, just of say like 10 houses for instance, and around that area tended to be a lot of private housing, then within that estate you're probably going to build a mixture of sizes of houses, let's say 2, 3, 4 bedroom houses, in the range of maybe 60 square meters up to maybe about 150 square meters. If that is in a high locational value area where there's like a lot of larger houses, and perhaps you've decided that you'll make that a gated community, let's say of a similar size of say 10 houses, and you then look at those and they are going to be in the much larger range of house, probably the 200 to 300 square meter. Clearly those houses in the second category are going to be of a higher finish than those of the other category, which are the smaller houses, which won't require such a high finish. So again, all those factors come into when you value a piece of land. Now, clearly in the second example, where you've got a higher finish, larger houses, they're probably going to sell more, and so that therefore may justify paying a higher land value than in the other area where you're building perhaps smaller houses, and the locational value would tend to not be the same. But it's not actually down to the locational value in itself. In other words, the way an estate agent would look at it and say, okay, we've got an area over here, I think that's going to be worth X, and then we've got this area here, which is probably not as good as this area, is going to be worth that. That does not come into the equation. It's really the finished product that determines what the value of that site is going to be. So let's take an example of where you have 4 houses that you're going to build. You've got this site and you think there's 4 houses that you're going to put on there. How would you value that site? The principle is the same. The difference will be the costs involved in that particular area. There's just one further point I'd like to make before I actually move on to give that example, and that is that in an area, say for instance, where typically the houses are 60 to 150 square meters, when you work out the pounds per square meter for, say, the 150 square meter house, if you were to build in that same area a house of 300 square meters, it's very unlikely, should I say, that it's going to anywhere double in value because you've overbuilt in that area. So you have to be very careful in building what seems to be right for that particular area. So let's look at an example of, we will have 4 houses, and we will assume that these houses are going to value up once they are sold and built, and they would be sold for £400,000 each. So say 400k, and therefore 4 would be then 1.6 million. So that is the ceiling on what everything that we calculate from here on is going to be. We can't really alter that figure. Yes, when we come to sell it, it may vary from that, but when we make the calculation for the valuation of the land, that's the ceiling. So this is unlike any other sort of product that you could perhaps take to the market, because generally what you'll do is you'll look at your cost of production, you'll look at your marketing, everything that goes into that, and then there will be a distribution cost, then there'll be a retailer profit to take into account, and that is how they achieve the ultimate selling price. In property development, we actually do the reverse. We start off with what the selling price is, because that is an absolute ceiling. As I say, it may vary by a little bit, but fundamentally that's what the valuation is. So from our 1.6 million, what we need to do is, the first thing is that we need to take off our profit. And so our profit on that, and I refer to this as build profit. So this is the point from when you have a piece of land that has full planning permission in place, and then you build out that site, then how much would that profit be? So it would be 25%. And the reason for that is that you need to have that level of profit, because if you go for commercial lending, then they are going to expect to see that level of profit. And the reason that they want that significant amount of profit is because they want to make sure that their money is protected. But it also means that if something goes really wrong, they have a margin of 25% in order to be able to dispose of your site. So that's why this is going to be 25% build profit. And so on each house, 400,000, we're keeping the numbers simple here, 100,000 we're going to make on that, on each house, which then becomes 400,000 is our total gross development value. Okay. Next, what we're going to do is that we're going to take off our costs, and there tend to be two types of costs. There's the physical structure that you are going to build, that is the build cost of that particular house. And then you're going to have the second, which is everything else that was associated in getting you into that site in the first place, and also getting you out of that site. So getting into the site would be things like applying for planning permission. I know we talked about having full planning, but we'll come to that in a moment. So it talks about everything about getting full planning permission, satisfying building control regulation, your insurances, all the other different costs that you're going to have, your health and safety provision for different things on site, and complying with that, your building warranty. And then exiting will be things like selling fees, estate agents fees, legal fees would be also in the purchase and the exiting purchase or the selling of it. So all those costs we call development costs. The actual physical structure we talk about build costs. And of course, those costs you've got to know for your own particular area. There is no global. I see so often on Facebook people saying, how much does it cost to build a house? Well, first of all, it depends on what type of house that you're going to put on there, the specification of that house, the labor rates in your area, the material prices in your area, and the size of the house, because depending on the size, it will change what the valuation is. Because if you build a house of 300 square meters and you have 3 bathrooms in it, and you build a house of 150 square meters and you have 3 bathrooms in it, then you've got a higher cost of bathrooms proportionately to the smaller house than the larger house, albeit that the larger house may have a higher specification, but significantly the value of those items go down as the size of the house goes up. So there's many factors that you need to be able to consider in there. I did create a video on build costs and why it's so difficult to actually determine what the build costs are. I'll put a link up in the description so you can have a look at that. But we actually use, for ourselves and our students, we have a model that we use to actually determine what our build costs are for our own particular area. We obviously know them for our area, but when we are teaching this to people, they need to know what the build costs are going to be for their own particular area. So So we take off our profit, 25% of the gross development value. We put in our costs there. And for this example, what we're going to do is we're going to assume that our build costs are, and we'll put our build costs and our development costs together. So we'll just put this as costs. And we're going to assume that it's going to be 250,000. Let's put that right. 250K per house, which then gives us a build cost of 1 million. So now we find that when we take our 1 million or 400,000 and deduct that from our 1.6 million, we're left with 200,000. And that is our land value. If we pay more than the 200,000 for our land, it comes out of our profit. So pay an extra 100,000 from there, and now you have only got 300,000. And that's why it's critical that you start top down to work out your valuation. Now, I did say earlier on about this is the build profit with full planning in place. However, what we recommend is that you, and to make this work generally, what you're going to have to do is actually source land that doesn't have planning in place. And so in order to do that, what you need to do is source that land and then achieve planning. So when you go to the landowner, you're actually looking to buy land that doesn't actually have planning in place. And you're going to secure that in a way that it allows you to have control of that land without having to pay for it until you've got all the permissions in place and you're ready to start building it out. So that's critically important. But because you are going to take the risk from the landowner and you are actually going to enhance the value of the current state of their land, because their land is not worth 200,000 without planning, despite what estate agents might tell you, it's actually worth considerably less than that. So this land, typically, it may only be worth 20, 30,000. So that 20, 30,000, between that and the 200,000 that you are going to uplift the value to, is that planning uplift. So there's 170,000, let's say, in this example. Well, that 170,000 is partly going to go to the landowner, but you should be sharing in that in order to cover the risk that you're taking by achieving plan or going for the planning permission, because you're going to have costs of getting the planning permission in the first place. So that's going to be architects' fees, town planning consultants' fees, and all the various surveys that they're going to ask. There's a cost to that. And yes, we have built that into the build profit or into our costs before we achieve our build profit. So, but nevertheless, we have to factor in the fact that every planning permission that we go for, we may not achieve. And so therefore, we have to mitigate that risk. And also, we need to be compensated for our time in actually achieving this result. So there is that profit there. And so many developers, I notice, and particularly training companies that teach property development, miss out this factor that there's a land uplift profit to be made that is exclusive to the build profit. So there's two profit centers when you source land that is off market and without planning permission in place. So if any of this interests you, we're holding a one-off course, and this is how you find land, everything you need to do from sourcing the land, taking it through the negotiation process, the evaluation, working out your costs, everything to do with that. So this is on next Thursday, or well, yes, this coming Thursday, as it is, on the 13th of June at 7 p.m. We're going to be holding a training on some of the principles here, but it's also the launch of this new course that we are going to be running. As I say, this course we're only going to be running one time, and it's really just to modify our existing coursework, and from then on, this will only be available within our Premier course, our mentoring program. So this is an opportunity to get tremendous value at this stage, but it's a one-off opportunity, I have to say to you. And that's not a sales technique, it's genuinely what we are going to be doing. So if that interests you, there'll be a link up below, a link down below. It will say join the wait list. Join that wait list. And then you'll get the login details for this coming Thursday to be able to come and join us on that training. There's no cost to attend, and ultimately, if it's something that you want, then there's an opportunity for you to join us on that particular program. That program, incidentally, is going to be fully supported, so you're going to be guided through it. A lot of the content will be online, but also we're going to have a weekly session where, with a small group of people, we're limiting this to only to 10 people, incidentally, so there'll be an opportunity there for you to join us on that. Just finally, if you don't already know, I have a book called You, a Property Developer. If you'd like a copy of that, I'm offering this currently for the price of postage and packaging. Again, you'll find a link in the description where you can get a copy of that. And incidentally, if you haven't already subscribed, remember to subscribe. Until the next time, speak to you then. Take care. Bye-bye.